There are poets whose words live for a generation. And then there are voices that seem eternal, voices that echo through centuries as though they were written yesterday. Among them, none shines brighter than Jalaluddin Rumi, the 13th century Sufi mystic whose words of love have crossed languages, cultures, and religions to speak to millions today. But Rumi was not born the poet of love. He was not always the mystical voice we quote so easily. He began as an ordinary man, a scholar, a jurist, respected for his knowledge, but unknown beyond his circle. His transformation into the Rumi, the voice of the soul, the poet of divine love, is itself the greatest lesson he offers. Love is the bridge between you and everything. These words were written more than 700 years ago by Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi, whose voice has traveled across centuries. Today, he is one of the best-selling poets in the English-speaking world. His words appear in classrooms, in yoga studios, in therapy offices, and in quiet moments of reflection. But who was Rumi? How did an ordinary scholar in medieval Anatolia become a timeless voice of love? And why do his teachings still speak so directly to our restless modern hearts? Rumi was born in 1207, likely in Balkh, in present-day Afghanistan, or in nearby Waksh, in what is now Tajikistan. His father, Bahau al-Din Walid, was a respected preacher and jurist whose mystical leanings influenced the young boy's early education. But Rumi's world was far from stable. The Mongol invasions were sweeping across Central Asia, pushing his family westward. They passed through Nishapur, Baghdad, and Damascus, before finally settling in Konya, in the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. This background of displacement, cultural mixing, and political upheaval shaped Rumi deeply. He grew up not only as a man of books, but also as a man intimately acquainted with exile and change. In Konya, Rumi became a respected jurist, preacher, and teacher. His sermons drew crowds, his opinions carried authority, and his reputation was established. For decades, he was a learned scholar, respected, yes, but not yet extraordinary. His transformation came through a single encounter. In 1244, Rumi met a wandering mystic named Shams of Tabriz. Shams was fiery, uncompromising, and uninterested in the safety of intellectual convention. He wanted truth to be lived, not just studied. Their friendship was brief, perhaps 4 years, but it changed. Rumi forever. Shams ignited in him a fire of love so intense that when Shams suddenly disappeared, whether murdered by jealous rivals or gone by choice, Rumi's grief broke him open. Out of that grief came poetry. Verses poured from him in waves, collected into what is now called the Divan-e Shams e Tabrizi, a vast body of lyric odes dedicated to the absent friend who had become, for Rumi, the very embodiment of the divine. Rumi himself would later say that his real poetry began when he met Shams. The scholar who had once spoken with the voice of books now sang with the voice of love. But Rumi's legacy is more than one book. 4 great works stand at its heart. Divan-e Shams, those fiery love poems of longing and ecstasy. The Masnavi, or the spiritual verses, 6 volumes of teaching poetry that blend fables, parables, Quranic commentary, and mystical reflection. Rumi himself called the Masnavi the roots of the religion. The discourses, or fihi ma fihi, prose talks recorded by his students, capture his voice as a teacher, and his letters, or maktubat, show him as a guide, writing to students and patrons about matters both spiritual and practical. Annemarie Schimmel, the great German scholar of Sufism, reminded readers that Rumi was not only a poet of passion, but also a careful teacher. His works are not just lyrical beauty, but a curriculum for the heart, using story and imagery to train perception, not merely to entertain. William Chittick, in his classic book, The Sufi Path of Love, emphasized that for Rumi, love is not mere sentiment, but the fire that transforms all states into clarity. Franklin Lewis, in his biography, Rumi, Past and Present, East and West, showed how Rumi's life, from his family's exile to his meeting with Shams, shaped this unique blend of intellect and passion. Rumi's poetry insists that love is the essence of life. But he does not mean only romance. He reveals love in many faces. Divine love, the burning desire for God that purifies the soul. Human love, the affection we feel for another, which becomes a mirror of the divine. Compassionate, self-love, not indulgence, but mercy toward our own wounds. And universal love, the recognition that every being is a drop of the same ocean. Through love, bitter things seem sweet, he wrote. Through love, copper becomes gold. Love, for him, is alchemy. It transforms sorrow into wisdom, weakness into strength, ordinary existence into something radiant with meaning. Rumi knew this not as theory, but as experience. He himself was transformed by grief. The wound, he wrote, is the place where the light enters you. Shams's disappearance was his wound, and also his opening. The jurist who had spoken of law became the poet who spoke of longing. The preacher who had guided communities became the mystic who guided the soul. His own transformation is the clearest example of the teaching he left us, that pain itself can become a doorway to love. Rumi's community practiced Samāʿ, listening to music and poetry with the whole being, and whirling as a form of embodied remembrance. At his funeral in Konya in 1273, Muslims, Christians, and Jews all came to mourn him. That moment, when people of many faiths walked together in his procession, remains a symbol of his true legacy. Rumi began as a scholar of law. He became Rumi through heartbreak, longing, and surrender. And in doing so, he discovered a love large enough to embrace the world. After his death in 1273, his followers formalized these practices into the Mevlevi order, known as the Whirling Dervishes. Every December in Konya, pilgrims still gather for Sheb-i Arus, the wedding night, celebrating Rumi's union with the beloved at death. His teachings were never abstract. They were sung, danced, and lived. But we must also read Rumi with care. His poetry is woven with layers of symbolism, drawn from the spiritual and cultural traditions of his time. Modern translators such as Jawed Mojaddedi and Alan Williams have brought this depth into English, helping readers experience both the beauty of his verses and the timeless wisdom they carry. The more we understand Rumi's context, the more we recognize how his voice reaches across centuries with a universal message of love, longing, and transformation. He still invites us. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. And that is why his teachings of love, born in the 13th century, tested in exile and loss, carried in poetry and ritual, remain lessons for our modern life. So why does Rumi matter today? It is a fair question. Why should we still listen to the words of a man who lived 8 centuries ago in a world so different from ours? The answer is simple: because human hearts have not changed. The outer form of our lives is different. We hold smartphones instead of scrolls. We travel by airplane instead of caravan. But our inner struggles remain the same. Loneliness, longing, fear, the search for meaning. Rumi matters because he speaks directly to these struggles, not with theory, but with the voice of lived experience. He himself knew exile, he knew heartbreak, he knew the pain of losing what he loved most. Think about our world now. We are more connected than ever before, yet loneliness has become a global epidemic. People scroll endlessly through feeds, comparing themselves, and still feel unseen. Rumi answers with a simple reminder. Belonging is not created by numbers or likes, but by love. We also live in an age of anxiety. We are constantly told to control, to plan, to measure our lives. And yet control slips through our fingers. Rumi offers another way. He invites us into trust, into surrender. Not a passive resignation, but an active openness to life's rhythm. Try to accept the changing seasons of your heart, he writes, even if you have never felt the winter before. And then there is the pressure of success. Our culture celebrates achievement, productivity, and accumulation. But in the quiet hours, so many people still feel empty. Rumi reminds us of a deeper truth. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. What research confirms today, Rumi already knew through the wisdom of the heart. Your task, he said, is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Rumi also matters because his message crosses boundaries. In a world divided by race, creed, and politics, he calls us back to what is shared. People of every background find themselves moved by his words, not because he erases difference, but because he speaks to what lies beneath difference. Finally, Rumi matters because he gives us a way to transform pain into wisdom. In a culture that often hides sorrow, he teaches us to honor it. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Heartbreak is not failure, it is initiation. Loss is not the end, it is the beginning of a deeper seeing. His own life testifies to this truth. Out of the wound of Shams's disappearance came verses that still heal hearts centuries later. So why does Rumi matter today? Because he does not offer us escape from the human condition. He offers us transformation within it. He shows us how to live with an open heart in a restless world, how to find belonging without borders, how to turn grief into music, and how to see ourselves not as fragments, but as part of a vast and timeless whole.